Hi, everyone. Welcome to Potluck Food Talks. Today, we have a special guest, Furqan Meerza. He's an Indian chef with Syrian heritage, and he has worked in some of the best restaurants in the world. And today, we're going to talk about curry and how curry is interpreted outside of India and what it actually is inside India.
Hey, Eric. Thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
Could you talk us a little bit about how Indians see Indian food abroad and how it compares to Indian food in India?
It's definitely not what they're eating in India for sure. It's not anywhere close to it. I mean, it also depends. Abroad is quite broad again. But then again, if you go to countries like the British, wherever the British Empire was, what they call the Commonwealth, these countries have a little better knowledge than, for example, if you come to Europe and you're eating it in Spain or in France, for example. I think the biggest challenge is not just knowing about it or the want to be sincere, but it's also the problem is that the people doing it, for example, in Spain right now, the people cooking the Indian food will not be Indians in the most case. I can tell you, it could be Bangladeshis, it could be Pakistani, Sri Lankans, with no offense. It's just that I think they find a bigger platform in Indian food to be able to run a business, for example.
Yeah, I guess the same happens with Italian food. Mm-hmm. For instance, in Berlin, you will see a lot of Italian restaurants run by Turkish people, for instance.
Exactly. And I think I don't blame this to anybody. It's just that, first of all, is the problem of the talent, if it's available, if there is the knowledge of how to cook it. And the second biggest challenge which is a lot with Italian food, is that you will not find the best pizza flour, but you will find some flour close to make a pizza, say in Japan. But then again, in Indian, there is so many ingredients which come down to very small things which are only grown in India, or they could not be transported because even in today's day and age, because of the perishability or other components. So I think that's also one more reason why you will not find really Indian food outside. And also that also causes the other problem, which is generalization. Because you don't find all the ingredients, you boil it down to a few which you find and then make a classic menu which you'll see in every other Indian restaurant, I'd say, outside India. I
would say my first contact with Indian food as a kid in Venezuela was curry powder. Uh-huh. And I don't know if this is something that is standardized. I understand that curry, you said talking about abroad is a very broad term, but even talking about India is a very broad term because it has so many regions, so many cultures, languages, a super long history. And next year it's going to be the country with the largest population. First in centuries that is in first place instead of China. So I also wanted to ask you, do you think Indian food has been misunderstood in foreign markets, particularly in the West? And what are some common misconceptions that you have observed?
I think the biggest one comes with the whole terminology of curry, because if you actually go to any Indian household, my generation knows what is curry because we have traveled and we see TV and there's a lot of exchange happening. But you find my grandparents or even my parents, they will not recognize what is curry to start with, because this is a word which was coined not by, everybody says it's the British, but it's actually the Portuguese people, the first European settlers in India who bought chili and potato and onions. But they also bought this generalization because they asked the local population what they're eating. And there are similar words. There's kari, there is karil, which refers to either a spice or a leaf or some preparation specifically. But as every European, it was very convenient to just make it a broad term, which is the biggest misconception. And now it's also accepted by Indians. Curry is anything which is either soupy or dry, has some kind of meat and vegetables. And it's a warm preparation usually. This stems to the other misconception that most Indian food has meat in it. Whereas you go to India and I come from a Muslim family living with 20 non-Muslim Hindu families living in a building. And you're the only ones who eat meat, for example. The difference is it's vast. 84% of them are Hindus who don't eat for various reasons. So that is one misconception as well. The other one being spicy, as in spicy hot to spicy flavorful are two tangents of spicy. I think it all depends on how you use it. The spice, it could end with you not having a great experience after eating an Indian meal, which is again a huge misconception, I think, which also is because of the powders that you mentioned. Curry powders are basically any spice blend, which every house has a different one. The only difference in India, you cook those spices before. You will start with your oil and then put some cumin seeds and some onions and then put this powder and then roast it and you basically cook it through. which will then not cause you that uneasiness and problems after eating a curry. And that's, I think, also European style of cooking, of just putting powders inside something liquid, which cannot really dissolve,
I remember as a kid, I used to think that curry was like a single spice, and actually the curry you find in the Western supermarket, they have like a similar flavor profile, while I guess that's not the case if you go to different families in India. And when I started in culinary school, one of the first things I did was making my own curry. And this is like a super nice experience to make your own spice blends, add some cardamom, add stuff that is normal, not in the curry you find in the supermarket, with a coffee grinder, and you get your own powder, and it's something super fun to do.
Yeah, I think it's just, depending on where you are. The British, for example, they liked the color of the curry. For example, if you go to India, the curry powders is also available. There is curry powders in India. They're called garam masalas or some kind of masala. It's the word for spice blend. But none of them are yellow, for example. The British had some fascination with the color yellow, and they put turmeric in every curry, like the Madras curry blend, and all of them are yellow or orangey of some sorts, which is not the truth in India. In India, there's a lot of concept of Ayurveda. So turmeric is important, but in a very small proportion, also at the right time of the day, with the right composition. So these things are just like things which have been bastardized, like Starbucks selling turmeric latte or the golden milk and making it famous, which we've been drinking as Indians, as young, small kids. So I think it's a lot of ununderstanding, not really putting in the effort to understand what everything comes from.
Yeah, I also remember seeing in a culinary magazine, there was this map of different curries, not only in India, but in all of Southeast Asia. And there were some variations with coconut powder and things that you usually don't associate with the curry powder.
Yeah, it's something it's all stemming from the colonization. A lot of it is stemming from colonization. Japan, not really a big part of the British colony, but also has many of them claim the national dish to be curry raiso, which is just Japanese curry with rice. Or the Thai have a curry, whereas they just blend the ingredients together, whereas we cook every spice. So I think it's a lot of various interpretations of this curry generalized terms. But studying Indian cuisine is just like studying the whole of Europe together.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's 28 states, and funnily enough, has 22 official languages. If you take a 1 rupee note, it has 22 official languages. None of them have the word curry, but Indians are known for curry, and for some funny reason.
That's very funny. You told me a story once that you met like an Indian guy, or someone told you, look, he's from India. You can talk in your own language, and the only common language you had was English.
Exactly, yeah. This happened at a local research center, doing some research with the brain language part of it with the restaurant Mughal. And the researchers, not only in Spain, everywhere happen to be Indian. I think it seems I'm the rare one who's a chef. Most of them are engineers or informatics or scientists. And this girl was from Kerala, which is down south of India. And I'm from Bombay, which is somewhere in the west. So I speak English, Hindi, Marathi, and Urdu, and she speaks Kannada, Malayalam, and both of them are not similar, but are written differently. So Urdu, you write from right to the left. She writes in different
alphabet as well. Wow.
Exactly. The script is different. I speak 3 languages, which all of them are like English script is different to Devanagari, which is Hindi script, and then Arab script, which is Urdu. And it's normal. It's not like I'm special. I think everybody in India is the same, which also comes to the other. This is also beautiful at once, but also creates problems and barriers, and things get lost in translation, which is why Indian food has not been able to. It's catchy and famous, but still it's not the true version of it, which is getting, because it's tough to communicate, I believe.
So in your opinion, what are some of the factors that have contributed to the misunderstandings and misrepresentations of Indian food abroad in foreign markets, especially in Europe and in the States?
I think, these are 2 different cases. For example, you just see a menu of a European Indian restaurant will have more chicken tikka masala and butter chicken and tandoori chicken. Whereas, and we'll also have a lot of South Indian dishes in Europe. Where you go to America, it's more the North Indian chana masala or things like this. It all stems from how the Indian settlers came into England in the first place. So when British colony started not as a colony but as an East India Company, they started trade because Portuguese and Dutch had parts of India, and the British wanted a bigger part of India. So it was a very proud thing to have Indian food in England. It was a royal food at that point, because all these people who went to to India as bureaucrats from the British government, they bought back this cuisine. So the common people in England didn't know it. England was in the middle of war and tough times in the Renaissance. And I think what happened there is they bought these cooks with them. So they bought their cooks that they had, the private cooks in India, they bought them back to England. And from there, all of this Indian food understanding has come. So I think the misunderstanding has happened because people have tried to do the same. Like if you want to make a mango chutney, but then mango in Victorian times is not an easy ingredient to find, you switch with apple. So I think those were substitutes made for that time. For example, tamarind is something very, very commonly found in India, and the curries, the sourness comes from tamarind. They switched with lemon juice at that point. So what looked like small, it's like a Chinese whisper. Whatever seems like a small problem at once, the more it multiplies, it just becomes a bigger problem because you have gone very far from the root essence of how. So I think the problem was Indian cuisine was not spread by a purpose, but by chance. Like Italian cuisine has delegates of the Napoleon pizza, so they have a committee which decides what goes where.
Yeah.
Which is not the case with Indian food, you know.
Yeah, I guess it also is because it's much wider and much wild. As you said, that there are 22 different languages, like a super long history.
Uh-huh.
Do you think so? By what you're saying, is there like a specific evolution of Indian food in the UK and in England?
Yeah, I think it first came with the Victorian food. What they had was the royal food because they had the recipes which were Indian food but made for non-Indians. It was all milded down in terms of spice and other factors. And then I think came because very famously just after the war when the times were better and England was again starting to boom, the economy was becoming bigger. They wanted to celebrate the Commonwealth. So England, in many occasions, if you see, the 20th century has organized these festivals where in the middle of London, they used to bring communities from India, from South Africa to show the heritage of what the British Empire was. And people learned from there about what Indian food looks like. So that was one era where the common people started learning what is Indian food. And then came the pub era. Today, Indian food is the pub food in England.
Okay.
It's because a lot of another immigration happened from Bangladesh because they had these steamships from Bangladesh which used to bring the Silk Route, carry out the whole Silk Route to England. And these people didn't have a great life putting coal inside the ship, so they just jumped on the ship and stayed in England. So they brought with them a different kind of Bangladeshi cuisine which has more mustard oil and fish powered cuisine. So I think it has seen a lot of phases, and right now we've stayed with the most convenient of them all by generalizing the whole the tons of things that came.
There are also like fine dining restaurants with Michelin stars and everything, right? If I'm not wrong, in London and also in New York, does Bisha's Khana has Michelin stars?
Yeah. Because Khana had a 3-star Michelin once. Now he's more into book writing and things, but there's the Tabla was a famous Indian restaurant in England. Most recently, the biggest name in Indian cuisine, although he's not very Indian, but is Gagan. Gagan has been in the top 5 in the world's 50 best and number 1 in Asia's 50 best. And Gagan does also in his menu, there's one course which is curry and rice. But again, this has it has come through because I think it's not only the heritage, but then again, these people who have made it famous and who've made it big on the Western stage have focused on one part of the Indian food, which I think is the trick. Because if you get into being traditional and authentic and sincere about all the parts of India, it's very tough, I think. So many restaurants like this in Dubai, for example, there are many, which is a closer platform to India in terms of getting open to the West. There's a lot of new stuff happening.
Yeah, but actually, Bisha's Khana has a restaurant in Dubai.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it's a good platform because it's a platform where these ideas are accepted, and there's also Indian population a lot in all these countries, and I think I see it to be received very well because people going there know that they're not going to have their classic Indian meal, and I think it's beautiful how people are open to see what more is there on this level in Indian food. Also
to mention about this chef, it's interesting that he opened a museum with old artifacts and culinary utensils, and I think it has a collection of over 10,000 culinary utensils from India, from all over the different regions, antiquities. So that has to be something interesting to take a look at.
Exactly, yeah. I've not seen it because I was already here in Europe, but I've heard about it. It's in the Manipal University. It's a university about culinary education as well, and he has helped to consolidate this museum, and it's beautiful because a lot of, India happening to be so huge and having the beauty of being in the center of the spice route, it has attracted always trade men and commercial activity. So all of them have passed their own culture. So I think Indian cuisine again is not, nobody can say it's authentic. Everything that is there in India today has come from somewhere in the world. But it's the beauty of how it's been accepted, and there is so many marks of history over it.
To finish with, I wanted to ask you, I had recently the privilege to try your butter chicken, which was amazing. And I remember I was telling this to a friend. He's not like a culinary person, but he actually asked, "Oh, great! And what did he have like a super good garam masala?" And I remember while we were eating that some people also ask you, "And aren't there any spices here?" And like this prejudice that Indian food has to be full of spices all the time. Well, this is a good example of how it doesn't have to. And you mentioned you applied like many secrets and tricks to cook that butter chicken. But could you share us some of those?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. So this is also one classic example of how cuisine changes, because what I made the other day for you and the other colleagues is again not very authentic, but then it's a fruit of what is available. So for example, I didn't have a tandoor, so I used the oven, but then again, to compensate for the smoke or for this element of being in close to charcoal, I just used a very traditional method. Actually, it's called dungar. It basically means to smoke something. And what you do there is you make however you make your curry or however you reach to the end of that, and this can be actually applied to any dish. And you take an aluminum foil, or classically people use onion skins. When sustainability didn't exist, people used onion skins. And you take a burning carbon, you burn the carbon either I used a blowtorch because we don't have fire in the kitchen, or you burn it on fire and just put it inside that bowl or the aluminum foil or the onion skin with some spices burning. And what you do next is you put a small blob of butter inside that. So that would itself, the reaction of butter and something burning will create a smoke. And then next thing is you cover it and try to trap that smoke inside. So that is one of the examples of how you can actually accustom yourself and adapt with what's going on. I think Indian food is not about just spicy or by ingredients. I think everything can be Indianized of sorts if you apply the principles. I think the basic principle to make any, say, a vegetable curry, not even meat, is everything starts with oil. It can be, mostly it's the vegetable sunflower oil or groundnut oil, something neutral. But then there are parts of India which use mustard oil, which is again something which is not used in Europe at all, which is delicious with something with fish, for example.
Yeah, I've had mustard oil and it's amazing.
It's beautiful. It has, it's also special. You can't use it by itself. You need to burn it first. You need to take it to a smoking point so it doesn't be so pungent on your throat at the end. So people burn it mostly in earthen pots and then use it. So you use the oil. People put either curry leaves or cumin powder or mustard seeds. The idea is to flavor the oil. You put something dry, which is a spice by flavor, and you put a bay leaf, something in the oil, it splutters. You put the onion, you roast it, you put the spice of your choice. If you have cumin powder, put cumin powder. If you have coriander, put coriander. But there is no such mix which will lead you to, I don't know, the best level of... But if you have a spice blend, put it right there. Roast it off and put whatever you want, the vegetable or the meat, and put some water, cover the lid, and whenever that thing cooks, the chicken or the vegetable, you have a curry in front of you. It's actually very simple. It's not about sticking to specific brands or ingredients. It's just...
Yeah, I guess curry is like an equivalent to, say, wok.
Exactly.
It's like a methodology that has some principles, and you can do whatever you want inside of those principles, and that would be a wok or a curry.
Exactly. You need to be free and out of their own things that tie them up. I think it's a beauty because a lot of these things which seem like bastardized or bad or not really Indian have actually contributed a lot to Indian food today as well. The whole world is waking up now to millets are the future food, and millets are amazing. But India used to have millets years ago. But thanks to the people waking up to millets, India has actually spoken to the UN, and next year is going to be the year of millets, for example, which brings a lot of trade and business to India. So I think not only Indian cuisine, but every cuisine has been bastardized at some point, and people have been upset. But I think just being accepting and seeing that version of things while knowing it's not the truest form of it and respecting each other, I think it's a beautiful way to continue.
That's it for this week's episode of Potluck Food Talks. If you like what we're doing, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok as Potluck Food Talks. The show airs every Monday.